Allegedly, maybe, perhaps.
We've developed a new product. It's completely synthetic, therefore no growing, no refining, no peasants, best of all, no international borders, no customs agents. There in that case in front of you are two detailed prospecti on marketing with anticipated cash flow and so forth.
You racist Americans, you just want to cut us poor Hispanics completely out of the market.
I think you know that there's no such thing as an American anymore. No Hispanics, no Japanese, no blacks, no whites, no nothing. It's just rich people and poor people. Poor people.
Most people know the internet changed the world, but fewer people know where it actually came from. The World Wide Web was invented in 1989 by Tim Berners-Lee while working at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research in Switzerland, home to the Large Hadron Collider. It was originally just a way for scientists to share data, and it grew from there into the thing that now runs our entire civilization. CERN already attracts a lot of curiosity, but things got strange in 2016 when a video surfaced showing what appeared to be a ritualistic ceremony in the CERN courtyard. It looked like a mock human sacrifice. CERN said it was a prank by researchers and that they were investigating. Make of that what you will. Anyway, spider silk. The fascination goes back a long way. In the sacred writings of ancient India, a large spider was described as the creator of the universe, weaving the web of which we inhabit apart. Throughout cultural and literary history, spider silk has been linked to creation, healing, and protection. Scientists have spent over a century trying to reproduce it in the lab. But the problem has always been scale. You can't farm spiders. They're cannibalistic. Mass harvesting from living arachnids has always been, as one article put it, a matter of science fiction. In 1979, researchers at Monash University published findings on the superstrength of spiderweb fiber, specifically from the Victorian golden orb weaver, whose webs can span over 5 meters and trap small birds. Even back then, scientists knew this material was extraordinary. By 1995, researchers had constructed synthetic genes encoding spider silk proteins, building DNA from scratch and getting bacteria to produce the silk. A huge milestone. By 2000, the field had advanced to where scientists were using genetic engineering to design spider silk with custom strength and elasticity, with potential medical and engineering applications. Then, in the early 2000s, things got wild. Scientists implanted spider genes into goats. The goats produced silk protein strands in their milk, which could be spun into a material called biosteel, 10 times stronger than steel. The Pentagon wanted it for anti-ballistic defense systems. Around the same time, a company called Craig Biocraft Laboratories in Michigan started working on a different approach, producing spider silk through genetically modified silkworms. Their technique essentially overwrites the silkworm's natural genetic recipe, replacing it with a tougher spider silk alternative. As their COO put it, "The world knows how to make silk. We've been doing it for 4 millennia. All we're doing is changing the recipe." Meanwhile, the Gates Foundation was funding research into new composite nanomaterials, including a $100,000 grant to the University of Manchester for graphene-based condoms. Advances in related supermaterials were happening everywhere. Self-healing polymers, strong but lightweight, 3D graphene, and big money was flowing into this space. Let's have a look at what's in Redacted Jeff's inbox. In November 2010, he received a Faculty of 1000 Scientific newsletter, a prestigious monthly update, and the featured articles: Spider silk protein being used as a molecular spring to measure tension in cell adhesion. Then, in 2014, a researcher at a lab in Boston accidentally stumbled onto something unexpected. During a cooking competition in the lab, yes, a cooking competition, he dipped strawberries into silk protein like a clear fondue. The result was underwhelming, and he shoved them aside. A week later, half the strawberries were completely rotten, but the silk-coated ones still looked fresh. The silk had created a thin layer that locked water in and kept oxygen out. Bacteria couldn't digest it fast enough to contaminate the fruit underneath. From that accident, a company called Mori was born, coating perishable food in silk to make it last longer. Spider silk wasn't just a super material for engineering and medicine. It was showing up in food preservation. In June 2017, someone emailed Redacted Jeff introducing a young scientist from Imperial College London, now at the Maxwell Center in Cambridge. This researcher was working on photoacoustics, nanoparticles that interface with cells for cancer treatment, and devices to sense or repair body and brain function. The email said, "You are about the only person I know who might get what this is." Scientists were being funneled directly to Redacted Jeff for funding. Then, in 2018, a paper in the journal Biomaterials changed the game. Researchers demonstrated that engineered spider silk particles could be used as a delivery system for vaccines, specifically spider silk microcapsules that delivered vaccines directly to the heart of immune cells. The particles were non-toxic, biocompatible, extremely stable, and could withstand temperatures over 100 degrees Celsius for hours. The researchers said this could work for both cancer vaccines and preventive vaccines against infectious diseases. Now think back to what we covered earlier. Lipid nanoparticles, the tiny fat bubbles that made mRNA vaccines possible. Lipid nanoparticles became the leading delivery system for mRNA vaccines, including the COVID-19 vaccines. They encapsulate and protect the mRNA, get it into cells, and trigger an immune response. But the scientific literature makes clear that lipid nanoparticles aren't the only option. Other types of nanoparticles have been explored for mRNA delivery: polymeric nanoparticles, peptides, and protein-based systems. Each offers different advantages in stability, targeted delivery, and versatility, and the potential goes beyond infectious disease into cancer treatment, personalized medicine, and genetic therapies. Spider silk nanoparticles fit right into that picture, potentially more stable, more durable, and more versatile than lipid nanoparticles. And here's where it gets really interesting. Researchers have developed a technique using something called CMRNA, circular mRNA, to simplify the production of spider silk proteins themselves. This circular mRNA provides a template that allows researchers to build and experiment with any fiber protein, from natural genes or artificial designs. They describe it as a path to significantly accelerating the development of protein-based biomaterials. So mRNA technology isn't just being used to make vaccines, it's being used to make spider silk. The two fields aren't just parallel, they're converging. In 2020, researchers found that spider mite silk nanoparticles could enter cell cytoplasm and support mammalian cell growth, opening yet another avenue for biomedical applications. By 2023, scientists achieved another milestone, producing full-length spider silk proteins from genetically modified silkworms for the first time, creating fibers 6 times tougher than Kevlar. And remember Craig Biocraft? They claim to have produced the first nearly pure spider silk, fabricated by silkworms at scale. They've now partnered with companies to make luxury streetwear, are working with Polartec on performance outerwear, and are exploring biomedical uses and bullet-resistant protective apparel, from a Michigan startup to scale production in under 2 decades. And then, here's research funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. A team from the University of Washington, Bristol, and Lawrence Berkeley published findings in Nature Chemistry on designing entirely new protein fibers inspired by silk and spider webs, using a machine learning algorithm called protein MPNN to engineer biomaterials at the molecular level. They noted applications in medical implants, environmental solutions, textiles, and bioelectronics. The researchers said they'd succeeded in producing these fibers at low cost using bacteria, but that more work was needed to grow them at scale. So let's take stock. A material stronger than steel and Kevlar, biocompatible and non-toxic, capable of delivering vaccines directly into immune cells, connected to mRNA technology at the production level, producible using bacteria, goats, or genetically modified silkworms, being used to preserve food, being commercialized for military and fashion applications, being researched by the biggest institutions in the world with Gates Foundation funding, and tracked by Redacted Jeff over a decade ago. As one industry figure put it, the general belief with spider silk has always been, if you build it, you'll find a use for it. The devil is in the details of what you build.
We sat down and designed a new version of the Silk project from the ground up, with the goal being to skip most of that tedious lab work and just have a company print the DNA and assemble the final plasmid for us. Then all we'd need to do is load it into some yeast, saving us a ton of time and expensive resources.
Researchers at McMaster University discovered something remarkable, a previously unknown mechanism in the human body that acts like a spider web. They found that neutrophils, the most abundant white blood cells in our body, can explode when they bind to pathogens coated in antibodies, releasing DNA outside the cell and creating a sticky tangle that traps and kills viruses like influenza and COVID-19. Essentially, your immune system builds its own web. The discovery has major implications for vaccine design. The lead researcher pointed out that injectable vaccines produce antibodies that are abundant in the blood, but those antibodies aren't as prevalent in the lungs and respiratory tract, which is where viruses like COVID actually enter the body. The researchers suggested that next-generation vaccines could be delivered as a spray or aerosol directly into the respiratory tract to trigger this web-like immune response right at the point of infection. But here's the catch. They also cautioned that this spider web mechanism can cause harm. If the web formation becomes uncontrollable, it can lead to inflammation and further illness. They point to the early waves of the pandemic, before vaccinations, when these web-like structures, called NETs, or neutrophil extracellular traps, were found in patients' lungs, making breathing more difficult. As one researcher put it, an immune response that's meant to protect you can end up harming you if it's not properly controlled. Then there's the imaging. A case study published in early 2021 documented what doctors called the spider web sign in COVID-19 pneumonia, a distinctive triangular or angular pattern visible in CT scans of patients' lungs. They were literally seeing web-like formations in the lungs of COVID patients. It's worth noting that the Gates Foundation co-founded CEPI in 2017, and in early 2025, CEPI awarded $5 million to a German biotech company called Ethris to develop inhaled, spray-dried mRNA vaccines suitable for mucosal, meaning nasal and respiratory, delivery. Ethris had also received $5 million directly from the Gates Foundation in June 2024 for a similar inhaled mRNA vaccine program. Now, since 2021, embalmers and some clinicians around the world have been reporting something else: the retrieval of long, elastic, white fibrous structures from the blood vessels of deceased individuals. These weren't ordinary post-mortem clots. They were described as rubbery, tentacle-like, and unlike anything previously seen. A Thai neurologist publicly stated that these structures were being found in mRNA vaccine recipients, both alive and dead. Health authorities pushed back, saying white clots have been identified in post-mortem autopsies even before COVID vaccines existed. Fact-checkers labeled the claims as false or misleading. But then, in February 2026, a landmark trilogy of studies was published by New Zealand-based researchers, funded by New Zealand doctors, speaking out with science. Using international labs on 3 continents, they comprehensively characterized these structures for the first time. Their conclusion? These are a previously unrecognized and abnormal form of intravascular clotting, a novel and persistent pathological entity.
Casts, these white rubbery clots, follow the shape of the internal blood vessels. What this means is, non-kinetical basically means it's not in the canon of knowledge. This is new. The silence from the pathological and medical journals around the world on this has been quite deafening. Why aren't they talking about this strange new phenomena and racing to characterize it? It really is quite bizarre.
So on one hand, we have the immune system building spiderweb-like traps in the lungs. On the other, we have unexplained fibrous structures being pulled from blood vessels. And in between, we have decades of research showing that spider silk nanoparticles can enter cells, deliver vaccines, and interact with the body at a molecular level. Now, before we wrap up, I want to take a quick detour back to Mr. Gates, because while we've been talking about synthetic spider silk and what it might be woven into, there's another thread worth pulling. Food. In 2011, Gates went on record saying we should be eating genetically modified wheat and corn.
So these are things that billions of years of using these products have been done.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
The idea being that GM crops are simply an extension of what nature was already doing, just accelerated. Then there's the cow question. Gates has been quite vocal about the emissions problem with cattle, specifically the methane they produce. And his solution? Eat less beef. He's backed artificial meat companies, argued for lab-grown protein as a serious alternative, and at one point suggested insects as a viable protein source for people in the West. Crickets, mealworms, that kind of thing. Now, he did walk some of that back. Around 2021, he updated his position on cow emissions, acknowledging that for poor countries, cattle are too economically essential to simply phase out, and that the focus should really be on richer nations changing their diets. A more nuanced position, but notably, it came after a fair amount of public pushback. And perhaps it's no coincidence that around the same time, his breakthrough energy ventures led a $12 million funding round for an Australian company called Ruminate, which is developing dietary supplements for cows designed to reduce their methane emissions. So rather than eliminating cattle farming, Gates is now also investing in making it cleaner. Whether that's a genuine change of heart or a pivot to profit probably depends on how charitable you're feeling. So Gates has spent years shaping the conversation around what we grow, what we eat, and what our food system should look like, which makes what comes next all the more worth paying attention to. Because Bill Gates is now the largest private owner of farmland in the United States. Through his investment firm, Cascade Investment, he's quietly accumulated around 275,000 acres across nearly 20 states. That's roughly a third of the size of Rhode Island. And most of those purchases were made through a web of limited liability companies. So local communities often didn't even know who their new landlord was until after the deals were done. Now, when he was asked about this on Reddit, he said there's no grand scheme involved and that a professional investment team makes all the decisions. Fair enough. But here's where it gets interesting. In 2021, the Gates Foundation launched something called Gates AG1, a nonprofit focused on agricultural innovation in developing countries. And in 2025, Gates-funded research produced mRNA lipid nanoparticle vaccines for cattle. The same mRNA technology used in the COVID vaccines, but this time for cows. The stated goal was to combat bird flu spreading through dairy herds. So let's just take a step back and look at the picture. The same man who became the most powerful figure in global health through the Gates Foundation, the same man who funded genetically modified mosquitoes, the same man whose foundation co-hosted a coronavirus pandemic simulation weeks before a real coronavirus pandemic, the same man who told us to eat GM crops, ditch beef, and consider insects for protein. That same man is now the biggest private farmland owner in America and is funding mRNA vaccines for the animals on those farms. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just asking you to notice the pattern, from health to insects to pandemics to food. At what point do you stop and ask, is one person supposed to have this much influence over this many systems that keep us alive?
I think we're having a reckoning as a society, right? Whatever questions remain there of what I can't even begin to know all of it, those questions are for those people and for even my ex-husband. They need to answer to those. I left my marriage. I had to leave my marriage. I wanted to leave my marriage. I had to leave I felt I needed to eventually leave the foundation. So it's just sad. That's the truth, right? And it's kind of like, at least for me.
Before we go, let's look at Google Trends quickly. Google Trends is a free tool by Google that shows you how popular a search term is over time and across different regions. It lets you see what the world is searching for, when, and you can go back years to spot historical patterns and spikes in interest around specific topics. Let's start off with some straightforward ones. Note the country/region and the date of the month with the spike in searches. Why were people searching spider silk coronavirus in Philadelphia in 2015? Wow, Philadelphia way back in 2005 with the spider silk vaccine airborne searches. Virgin Islands, 2004, spider silk vaccine COVID. COVID, that name didn't exist until the WHO coined it on February 11th, 2020. Spider silk clot in 2015 in Philadelphia. And in 2010 with the spider silk fibroid clot. Oh, nice. Grow spider silk in person had a spike in 2004.
Which was misdiagnosed by a I'm not going to say what race, what people, doctor, and what hospital, and what media went to. We know I can't say that. It was a...
Они привыкли столетиями набивать брюхо человеческой плотью, а карманы деньгами. Но они должны понять, что бал вампиров заканчивается.